Hello and welcome, I'm Steelfur. This is another episode of Steelfur Speaks. This is a quick deck tech based on the deck I played recently at UK Nationals. I finished 27th. I went 3-3 in CC and 4-2 in draft, finishing with an 8-7-5 score. But look, if we're being honest, right, two of the CC games that I lost were completely within my remit not to lose. I made some pretty critical mistakes, which I'll talk about in another video when I'm doing my review. But safe to say they were resolving around traverse, how I blocked, pivot turns when I needed to use traverse, using traverse wrongly, that kind of thing. So they are kind of relevant for this video, but I don't really want to focus on them. My point is, this list could very easily have been a 5-1 list. This list very easily could have got me to top 8, and it's very similar to the list that ended up winning the event. As far as I know, it hasn't been published yet. As always, I can't really, not as always, I do make my own lists, but the impetus of this list came from George Roger, who is, of course, part of Team Toxic from the UK, former UK national champion, and Ninja Guru. He is always hanging around in the Purple Discord Ninja channel, someone I chat to a lot about Ninja, and he provided a lot of the, some of the more interesting ideas for this deck. So, I think when you come down to it, my list was, we had the Strides, we had the Shuka, we had the Traverse, we have the Kasaya. I have Aspect of Tiger and Bonds and Chase the Tails. And then things that come from George that are interesting are stuff like Bittering Thorns, Chase the Tail, making sure it's 2 Sort the Wounds, not 3. He does a lot of very in-depth deck building and testing. So when he shares his insights, I'm very keen to listen to what he says and incorporate those in. And then, things that he says become obvious when you think about them long enough. So let's break this down card by card. Like, Aspect of Tiger Body comes in after a red attack and makes a tiger. Obviously, this is really good for enabling Chase the Tail, and also Tiger Swipe to a lesser extent. In general, its role is just as a tutable 0 for 3, because if you've got an Anthem effect like Art of War going on, or you've played Transcend the Jade Tiger or something like that, it comes in as a 0 for 4. You get a tiger. If you've played Ancestral Harmony, it comes in as a 0 for 4. So basically it gets buffed very nicely. And if you've played Art of War, it comes in as a 0 for 5. So not only does it have Chase the Tail synergy, but it also has very, very good synergy with the Anthem effects that you play in the deck. But with Chase the Tail, it's a real star. Because remember that Chase the Tail says if your last attack was a tiger, you get the benefit. And sorry, just let me check something. Yeah, it's fine. It's all just recipes on my bookmark bar. Chase the Tail says if your last attack was a tiger, your next tiger, so you don't actually have to play the tiger immediately afterwards. So going Chase the Tail into Aspect of Tiger Body to get your second tiger is an easy way to guarantee lots of damage. Bittering Thorns is a 1 for 4 that requires very little setup and can turn your Kakara or your Talishar into either a 5 or a 3 attack, as well as the possibility to buff others. It's just so above rate that it makes your bad turns good, which is just why it's really nice to play. It fits into a lot of places. I wish it had combo, but it doesn't, so what can you do? Bonds of Ancestry obviously is stellar because you can fetch any of these cards, or you can fetch and Descendant Gustwave or another Bonds of Agony and extend your turn even further. It's just a fantastic card. Really does degenerate things in Zen. Chase the Tail is like, when it's good, and sometimes it'll brick your hand. So I'm actually on the fence a little bit about Chase the Tail after the tournament. Like, when it's good, it's a 1 for 7. And obviously, if you have any buffs, it becomes a 1 for, 8 or a 1 for 9. Like, if you have Art of War, this becomes a 1 for 9. It's just really good. It's really fantastic. But it is awkward. Like, if you draw this, like, the thing is, right? Okay, the real thing about this is, a lot of the time you are banishing a tiger to Art of War. Now, whether that's a correct decision or not does kind of depend on your hand. But if you banish a tiger to Art of War and you draw Chase the Tail, you're kind of screwed. It doesn't have Go Again. You can't give it Go Again. You don't have a tiger in your hand. You don't have any tiger generators, really, except pitching. So if you aren't transcended and you banish a tiger with Art of War and you draw Chase the Tail, you're a little bit fucked. Shouldn't swear too much, but so for that reason, it's like banishing a tiger, not always actually the correct decision. Like, you think it's a free tiger banish, but actually sometimes you don't want to banish that tiger. You want to banish a different red attack, because actually if you draw, you need to kind of be aware of your deck a little bit. And if you draw Chase the Tail, an aspect of Tiger Body without a tiger, or a red attack with Go Again, you can get a little bit bricked, which is one of the reasons I lost one of the matchups that I played, was because I actually bricked my hand by banishing a tiger instead of banishing a different red. I think I had 100 wins red, and I said, well, I'll banish the tiger. And then I drew a Chase the Tail, and I couldn't even start the Chase the Tail. Never mind finish it. Right, so Command & Conquer's mirror tech. I'm not playing the Marvel version of it, but I just have the setting on that puts all the nicest versions of everything everywhere. But in the mirror, people want to put stuff in their arsenal, and by playing Command & Conquer, you force Zen to either lose an Art of War or an Ancestral Harmony in their arsenal, or to give you all their equipment, which is fine, or to block it from hand. Either way, you're winning. It's a great card in the mirror. Descendant Gust Wave. Again, part of the bonds combo, just really good. If you draw one of these, you transcend, you search for the other one. It's just perfect. 100 wins, just amazing to search for. I mean, if you draw one of these in your hand and you search for another one, it's really on rate. If you play one of these to transcend, it's really on rate. It's amazing. Spinning Wheel Kick is exactly the same. Like, you don't always have a Bonds or a Descendant in your hand, and you're not searching for a Descendant Gust Wave if you don't have a Bonds. Like, you want to keep it for those turns, because it's not really above rate unless you have a Bonds. Whereas a Spinning Wheel Kick is a 1 for 4. It's always on rate. So if you transcend and you don't have anything to pick, or you're not sure what your draws are going to be because you haven't seen a lot of cards yet and you don't know what's left in the deck, getting a Spinning Wheel Kick is really good. I mean, it's a 1 for 4, and also you do have the added benefit that if you can find 2 of these, again, like, I loved, if I had Descendant and Bonds naturally, going to get a Spinning Wheel Kick, and then playing it, closing the combat chain, then playing Descendant, Bonds of Ancestry, fetching the Spinning Wheel Kick again. There's a lot of things you can do with these combo attacks that don't have any inbuilt requirements, right? So that's kind of good. Tiger Swipe is just a really good threat to get more Tigers, especially if you've played Art of War and those Tigers have +1. It's something that, can easily turn into a 1 for 8 or a 0 for 8 if it's not blocked. So obviously people block it a lot, which means your other attacks can hit. Or just, you slow down their turn. Art of War kind of speaks for itself. You can banish a tiger, you can banish a 0 for 0, and draw 2 cards and get +1/+1, or you can banish any other attack and just say, okay, cool, I'm keeping my tigers for my Chase the Tails. But I mean, obviously, the ability to block with Stride of Reprisal to get a tiger in your hand and banish that tiger with Art of War is a huge part of the power cycle of this deck. Because you can guarantee that you have an attack you want to banish for Art of War and then play the rest of your hand. Salt the Wound is a killer after huge turns. I had this come in for 10, my highest one from UK Nats, but it could easily come in for more. Ancestral Harmony obviously buffs all of your shenanigans. Playing this into a Bond Descendant turn usually makes it a 0 for 3. You can often make it more if you hit, like I have done, a Spinning Wheel Kick or an aspect of Tiger Body or 100 wins. You're suddenly getting another 0 for 4, and this turns into a 0 for 7. It's an insane card. You play all the Transcends because Transcending gets you a free resource with Kasaya, which is a broken card because it's better than Tunic, and it can give you a Zen State, and it can block for 2. Zen State is just so impactful in the mirror and against Kano and all these kind of things that you just want to be transcending as much as possible. And if you end up with 2 Chi in hand in the mirror or in an aggro matchup, you're just going to pop Kasaya, right? If you've transcended 3 or 4 times and you're kind of in the mid-game and you're not going to be transcending all that much all the time, you're just popping this Kakaya. Like, if you think your opponent's just done an Art of War Ancestral Harmony turn and you're like, how much damage am I going to take? Pitching that Chi in your hand to make a Zen State token will save you the game. Levels of Enlightenment, fantastic. Just remember that you're going to, with levels, like the best levels is with a 3-card hand, at least, preferably 4, where 2 of those cards, well, one of those cards is blue and the other one is a pass over. The best play you can do with levels is pitching a blue for levels, immediately transcending whatever Transcend you want. They all work on levels of Enlightenment. And then pitching that Transcend to Zen. It's a little bit awkward because you don't know what you're going to draw off the levels, but by doing that, you easily stack 2 blues in your pitch zone, and then, of course, you get to choose draw a card and go again. So you get go again, draw a card, and you get your Transcend, so you have 3 resources. You're set up for the entire turn, and you draw a card. All of these are great. Like, some of them are more awkward to play, but they're just all good, and you just want to Transcend as much as possible for the 3 resources. This round's on me. I love it in the mirror. Some people have said, oh, it's bad in the mirror because you're giving them an extra card. This round's on me is like, if you choose the right turn to play this, when you have threats to throw and they are trying to hold cards for a big turn, you either get tons of free damage or you get their entire next turn neutered. I've had this card block for 10. I have had this card negate Art of War. I have played 2 of them on the same turn, and my opponent has essentially been time walked out of their next turn, and also had to use some of their cards to block, so it was like win-win from my situation. I got another powerful turn. Wind Chakra is just filling in a slot for a blue. I think during UK Nats, I had Orihon in here, which is an interesting card with Traverse, because you can always save your Traverse to play the Orihon, and then draw loads of cards, which is a good combo. I kind of took it out for Wind Chakra just because I think Orihon is more awkward and more complicated, so for this deck I feel like better to play just with Wind Chakra, but if you want to experiment with Orihon, this is the slot that I would put it in. And then we have the inventory, Oasis Respite, obviously Kano, Snag, and Warmongers. Warmongers for Azalea, which comes in instead of this round's on me. Snag for Nu. Basically, Snag and Warmongers come in against Nu in favor of levels of Enlightenment, and this round's on me. You can't play either of those really into Nu, so don't bother. Just switch those out. And then, of course, you've got Kano Tech, Nolra and Gloves, Spellfray Tiara, Tide Flippers, plus Oasis. That gives you the option of blocking a lot of damage. And you've got Time Skippers to stop yourself. Basically, just stop the threat of being looped by Prism. Like, if you don't have Time Skippers, they might try and loop you. If you do have Time Skippers, they're not really going to. The equipment's pretty obvious. Traverse is, like, the best equipment in the game and also the most tricky to play. I definitely lost a game because I triggered it at the wrong time on a hand that was good but not good enough. You really have to learn when it's the best time to use it, but it will also deliver some of the best turns in the game. Traverse has delivered a 45 damage turn to me of 4 cards. It's done some disgusting things. You'll see Talishar in here. Talishar is just a great chain finisher in fast games. Obviously, in any slower games against like Warriors or Illusionists or any game you think is going to go slowly, you bring in the Kakara. Guardians as well. Like if there's a possibility that they're going to block most of your turn and just like try and stall you out, you obviously need to bring the Kakara because it doesn't blow up. If you're playing against someone who is going to be trying to race you, or in a game that you will go through them fast, Talishar is obviously great. There are knock-on effects of Talishar, which I think is worth to understand. So because you're playing Talishar, you do have to focus on things like Bittering Thorns, things like Spinning Wheel Kick, things like 100 Winds. If you weren't playing Talishar, if you were playing like Zephyr Needles, which are legit, they are legit specifically for the Zen matchup. Like, don't play them in every matchup, but in the really short aggro games, taking a card out of your opponent's hand to blow up your weapon is fine, and if not, they take 4 damage, so that's fine. So Zephyr Needles do have a place. But if you're playing Zephyr Needles, then you can play more chain enders like Sensor, like Mauling Key, stuff like that finishes your chain. Obviously, if you're playing Talishar, you don't want to play that many things that finish your chain because then you can't attack with Talishar. So you'll see in this deck, the only actual chain enders we have, i.e. things that won't have Go Again if we play correctly, are Command and Conquer because the power of Arsenal Disruption, and Salt the Wound because of how much damage it can do. So basically, if you don't have Command and Conquer or Salt the Wound in hand, that's when you would activate Talishar. And also, if you are in a situation where you think they're going to block a lot and you have Salt the Wound in hand, that might be the card you block with so that you can send Talishar instead of Salt the Wound. And then still block and send good damage. Obviously, if you know they're relying on their arsenal, then Command and Conquer is going to be your default. In terms of like draw 4s and things like that, which I always like to do with these kind of decks, I think, if you're doing a deck tech, it's good to do draw 4. This hand is quite interesting because this is an amazing late game hand, right? If this is a late game hand, you've obviously got 3 damage, 7 damage, plus an extra descendant into another bond, into another attack. So you could very easily do, base 7, 14, plus an extra, one more damage. And if this was a late game hand and you had Traverse, you could actually do Descendant Bonds, search for a Bonds, Descendant Bonds, search for a Descendant, and then tutor the other bonds with this, and then you do that 3 times, right? So if this was a late game hand, it's amazing. If this is an early game hand, like if I'm going first, what am I doing on this hand? I'm playing this rounds on me, right? With Descendant Gust Wave, I'm probably arsenaling one of these, right? What would I draw? I'd draw a Bittering Thorns. So, okay, if I was playing that, I would draw a Bittering Thorns. I'd probably try and play a few cards out. I'd probably end the arsenal with a Bonds or a Descendant in my arsenal. It would probably be the Descendant just because I had 2 of them. So I'd probably put one of those in my arsenal. So if I drew a Bonds, I could fetch the other Bonds and it would work very well. See, this is interesting because this is the sort of hand that confuses people quite a lot about Zen. This is not actually a particularly good hand, right? But in this sort of situation, you might block with the Stride of Reprisal. You might actually then play Art of War to draw 2 cards, banish that Tiger. You'd probably pitch the Bonds of Ancestry, and then you draw 2 more Bonds of Ancestry, right? And then suddenly your hand turns into Descendant Bonds with Art of War active, with a Transcend that you can fetch, either another Descendant because you drew this Bonds of Agony or something else. You probably end up pitching this, and then basically you get your turn to go on from there. Yeah, this is an awkward hand as well. You probably end up pitching, you probably end up banishing the Chase the Tail, which then draws you 100 Winds, Homage. You're just going to play a few cards, block, right? Try and get the Art of War into Arsenal. So you're going to look at these hands, like it's not actually, as much as Zen does go off, he does also brick quite a lot. So sometimes you will find yourself with a hand, imagine if we didn't have the Bonds here, right? If we just had Descendant Gust Wave and something else. The correct answer is actually just to pitch Ancestral Harmony, Spinning Wheel Kick, swing the weapon, and Descendant into Arsenal and block with the 4th card, right? And then you're setting yourself up with an Ancestral Harmony in Arsenal, and then of course you're going to get that, you're going to get the Ancestral Harmony here. You're just going to play Descendant into Command and Conquer, and you're going to wait for a turn when the Ancestral Harmony becomes good. Then you draw this hand, right? You've had Ancestral Harmony in your arsenal for 2 turns, assuming it stays there. One of the reasons that Nu is so good, and Assassins in general are so good into Ninja, is the disruption of the arsenal effects. But if you still had that Ancestral Harmony in arsenal, right? You're going to play that. You're going to stir the pot. You're going to play Jade Art Tiger Domain, Transcending again, pitching, probably dropping an Ocean. Before you've even done anything, you've generated 2 resources that will pay for your CNC. You have a Search, you have 2 Tigers, and you have 2 Chi in your hand, right? This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. You hit Ancestral Harmony, you banish Command and Conquer. That doesn't matter. You're going to go get Chase the Tail. You're going to get Chase the Tail. You're going to do a 1 attack, a 4 attack, a 4 attack, and then a CNC. So you're just going to present 15 damage. That's fine. 16 either way because you did Chase the Tail. So you're going to present 16 damage. That'll be fine. Okay, so there are some good hands to be found in here. I guess one of the things I'm trying to illustrate is that Zen is not consistently always good. One of the things that does skew him to being better on average is the role of Traverse the Universe. Okay, so these hands are bad, right? These hands are I'm blocking and sending something. You could easily, with a hand like this, you might go, okay, I'm just going to block with these. Or maybe Arsenal one of these, block for 3. I'm going to send the Kakara if I have it, and then into the levels for 5. You're just going to threaten a bit of damage and bring them closer to kill range. So it's not, I guess one of the points of this is that I'm trying to demonstrate that a lot of these Zen hands can be quite clunky. So you kind of need to think about how you're doing. If your opponent, this is an interesting one. If you were going second and your opponent, you drew this hand, one of the things you might actually consider doing is just blocking with Stride of Reprisal and seeing how much damage they're going to do. If they don't threaten a lot of damage turn 1, then your response after that is just to go, okay, I've got 1 Tiger, so I'll just go attack for 0, come in for 4, come in for 3, come in for 3, and then, you know, kind of threaten a very good turn 1. But equally, block with your Descendant, block with your Aspect of Tiger body. Oh, sorry, block with your Descendant, block with your Bonds, get them in the graveyard, keep these 2, and maybe you draw something to go, get a Tiger. But really, I think you just send block as much as you would on turn 0 and then see where you end up, right? So, you know, the deck can brick as much as it can do good things. The thing that's really interesting is how Traverse and Stride get you out of brick situations. So I think that's one thing mostly to focus on, is when you're going to use those. The deck is really clunky without it. I mean, here you've got built-in Go Again. You probably play Descendant into the blue Bonds so you can transcend and then see where you go from that. Yeah. Really, this is a deck you need to play in person or on Talishar. Like, these hands do not look good until you start searching, until you start getting Tigers, until you start doing all of that stuff. They look clunky. When you start to put them together on paper, they turn from clunky into, oh, and suddenly here I'm presenting 36 damage. All right, this is my deck tech. Have a look at the deck. I'll put the link in. It's pretty public now that it's won a national championships. And I'm happy to talk about the list that I played. It was a great list. I'm grateful for the people who put a lot of thought and ideas into it. I mean, you know, while some of the choices I think are more obvious, like Snag into New, you know, the decision to run multiple Spellfray pieces and Oasis Respite and stuff is just brilliant. And, you know, I think a lot of work has gone into these kind of lists, and I think Talishar is much, much better than Zephyr Needle, so we'll go with that.